The champagne bubbles tickled my nose as I watched my daughter Sarah dance with her new husband Marcus. Her white dress swirled around her like a cloud, and for a moment, she looked exactly like she had at 5 years old, spinning in our backyard until she collapsed in giggles. My heart swelled with love and pride, but underneath it all, a familiar weight pressed against my chest, the secret I'd been carrying for 3 years. $10 million. That's what Robert had left me when he passed away suddenly from a heart attack. My late husband, brilliant and methodical as always, had quietly built a fortune through his tech investments and real estate ventures. He'd kept it all very private, very discreet. Even I hadn't known the full extent until the lawyers contacted me after the funeral. "Mrs. Chen," the estate attorney had said, sliding papers across his mahogany desk, "your husband was quite conservative in his lifestyle choices, but very aggressive in his investments. The total estate value is just over $10 million. I'd nearly fainted right there in his office. Sarah knew her stepfather had been comfortable. We lived in a nice house, took decent vacations, never wanted for anything, but she had no idea about the money. No one did. Robert had made me promise, in one of our last conversations, that I would be careful about who I trusted with this information. "Money changes people, Margaret," he'd said, holding my hand in his hospital bed just days before he died. "Even good people. Promise me you'll be smart about this." Kept that promise. When Sarah announced her engagement to Marcus after a whirlwind 6-month romance, every instinct I had screamed at me to run a background check, to dig deeper, to be cautious. But I didn't want to be the overbearing mother-in-law. Sarah was 28, a successful marketing manager, capable of making her own decisions. And Marcus seemed nice enough. He was handsome in that polished way that made me slightly uncomfortable. 2 perfect teeth, 2 expensive clothes for someone who claimed to work in import-export. But Sarah was glowing whenever she talked about him, and I'd learned long ago that sometimes the best thing a mother can do is bite her tongue and trust her child. Standing at the reception now, watching them sway to their first dance as husband and wife, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride, joy, love for my daughter, but also relief that I'd kept the inheritance secret. Something about Marcus had always felt slightly off to me, though I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. "Beautiful ceremony," said a voice beside me. I turned to see Marcus's best man, David, holding 2 champagne flutes. He offered me one with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You must be so happy for them." "I am," I replied, accepting the glass. Though I have to admit, everything happened so fast. Sometimes I feel like I barely know Marcus. David's expression flickered for just a moment. "Oh, Marcus is. He's got quite a head for business. Very ambitious. Sarah's a lucky woman to have someone who can provide for her so well." The way he said provide made my skin crawl, but I smiled politely and excused myself. Throughout the rest of the evening, I noticed David and several of Marcus's other friends watching me with interest. Not the casual interest of new in-laws getting to know each other, but something more calculating. By the time the reception ended, I was exhausted and ready to go home to my quiet house. Sarah and Marcus were leaving the next morning for their honeymoon in Bali. 2 weeks at a resort that I knew cost more than most people made in 6 months. When I'd asked Marcus how they could afford such an extravagant trip, he'd winked and said he'd been saving up. I kissed Sarah goodbye, whispering how proud I was and how much I loved her. As I hugged Marcus, he held on a little too long and whispered in my ear, "We're family now, Mom. I hope we can be very close." The way he said it made me shiver, but I attributed it to wedding day emotions and champagne. 3 days later, I was in my kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Marcus standing on my front porch, alone, holding a leather briefcase. My stomach dropped. "Marcus," I said, opening the door. "What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be in Bali?" His smile was different now. Sharper, more calculated. "We need to talk, Margaret. May I come in?" Every instinct told me to say no, but he was my son-in-law now. Reluctantly, I stepped aside and let him enter. He walked straight to my living room as if he owned the place, setting his briefcase on my coffee table with a decisive thud. "Sarah doesn't know I'm here," he said, his voice taking on a businesslike tone I'd never heard before. "She thinks I'm dealing with a work emergency before we fly out tonight." "What's this about, Marcus?" He clicked open the briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "This is about your late husband's estate. Specifically, the $10 million you've been hiding." The blood drained from my face. "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Come on, Margaret. We both know that's not true." Robert Chen, tech investor, real estate mogul, very private about his wealth, died 3 years ago, left everything to his beloved wife. Did you really think no one would figure it out? My legs felt weak. I sank into my armchair, trying to process what was happening. How did I find out? Marcus settled into Robert's old chair across from me, completely at ease. "Let's just say I have friends who are very good at research. The question isn't how I found out, Margaret. The question is what we're going to do about it." "We." The word came out as a whisper. "You see, I have some debts. Significant debts. To people who aren't particularly patient about repayment." He leaned forward, his expression hardening. "I thought marrying Sarah would give me access to family money eventually. But 3 days of marriage and she's still talking about her part-time job like we need the income. Clearly, she doesn't know about your windfall either." "Leave Sarah out of this," I said, finding my voice. "Whatever you want. What I want is simple." Marcus pulled a document from the stack and placed it in front of me. "This is a partnership agreement. You're going to sign over 40% of your inheritance to me. $4 million. As a wedding gift and investment in your daughter's future. In return, I'll make sure Sarah never finds out about the money you've been hiding from her." I stared at the papers, my vision blurring. "You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a business proposition. Think about it, Margaret. Sarah believes her mother is just getting by on Social Security and her part-time job at the bookstore. How do you think she'll feel when she learns you've been sitting on $10 million while she's been paying off student loans and sharing a tiny apartment with roommates?" The words hit like physical blows. Sarah had struggled after college, working multiple jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. I'd offered to help with money, but she'd always refused, saying she needed to make it on her own. If she knew I could have made her life easier all along. "She'll understand," I said weakly. "Will she?" "Let's see." Her mother, who she thinks is barely scraping by, has been secretly wealthy for 3 years. During which time Sarah has eaten ramen noodles for dinner, walked to work to save on gas, and turned down job opportunities in other cities because she was worried about leaving her poor, struggling mother alone. Marcus's smile was cruel. "I don't think she'll understand at all." My hands shook as I stared at the contract. "This is extortion. This is family business. $4 million, Margaret. That still leaves you $6 million. More money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes. And I promise to take very good care of your daughter." "What kind of debts do you have that require $4 million? Marcus's expression darkened. "The kind that get you killed if you don't pay them. Let's just say I made some poor choices in my previous business ventures. Choices that certain investors are eager to see resolved." "You mean you're a criminal?" "I mean I'm a businessman who took some calculated risks that didn't pay off." "But that's not your concern, Margaret. Your concern is protecting your relationship with your daughter and ensuring her happiness. Which brings me to the second part of our agreement." He pulled out another document. "This is a revised will, leaving everything to Sarah and me jointly when you die. With me as the executor, of course. Just to ensure there are no complications down the line. You want me to change my will. I want to make sure we're all protected. Sarah deserves security, don't you think? And as her husband, I'll make sure she's taken care of." I looked at this man I barely knew, who had somehow uncovered my deepest secret and was now sitting in my living room, calmly discussing how to steal my dead husband's money. "What if I refuse?" Marcus's smile disappeared entirely. Then I'll have a very interesting conversation with my wife about her mother's secret fortune. And who knows? Maybe I'll also mention some other interesting things I've learned. Like how you've been volunteering at the senior center every Tuesday, telling them you can barely afford your medications, letting them pay for your lunch out of their charity fund. My stomach twisted. The senior center had been so kind to me, and I'd been too embarrassed to admit I was actually fine financially. It had started as a misunderstanding and snowballed from there. Or maybe I'll share some details about your late husband's business practices. Amazing what you can find in old court records if you know where to look. Some of Robert's early deals were questionable. Nothing illegal technically, but certainly not the saintly image Sarah has of her stepfather. Robert was a good man, I whispered. Robert was a businessman who did what he had to do to build wealth. Just like I'm doing now. Marcus leaned back, studying me. The way I see it, you have two choices, Margaret. Sign the papers, give me $4 million, and everyone stays happy. Or refuse, and watch your relationship with your daughter implode while I make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman you really are. The room felt like it was spinning. This couldn't be happening. 3 days ago, I'd watched my daughter marry this man, believing she'd found happiness. Now he was sitting in my living room, casually destroying everything. I need time to think about this, I said. You have until tomorrow morning. I fly back to Bali tomorrow afternoon, and I'd prefer to have this resolved before then. Don't make me extend my business trip, Margaret. That would make me irritated. Marcus stood up, closing his briefcase with a sharp snap. Oh, and don't get any ideas about telling Sarah or going to the police. Remember, I'm not actually doing anything illegal. I'm simply offering you a business partnership and pointing out some unfortunate consequences if you decline. No threats, no coercion. Just family looking out for family. He walked to the front door, then paused and turned back. You know, Margaret, you really should be more careful about who you trust. When Sarah told me how secretive you'd been about money, how you always changed the subject when she asked about finances, it got me curious. A little research revealed some very interesting public records. Sarah talked to you about me. Wives talk to their husbands, Margaret. Sarah's been worried about you for years, thinking you were struggling financially, trying to figure out how to help without hurting your pride. Ironic, isn't it? After he left, I sat in my living room for hours, staring at the contracts he'd left behind. The numbers blurred together as tears streamed down my face. How had this happened? How had I gone from watching my daughter's wedding to being blackmailed by her husband in the span of 3 days? I thought about Robert, about the promise I'd made to be careful with the money. He'd been so worried about people taking advantage of me, and I'd been so focused on protecting the secret that I'd never considered someone might discover it anyway. The worst part was that Marcus was right about Sarah. She would be devastated to learn I'd hidden such a significant financial cushion while she struggled. Not because of the money itself, but because of the lies, the deception, the lost opportunities to help her when she needed it most. But $4 million. The amount was staggering. And the revised will, essentially signing over control of my entire estate to a man I barely knew and now deeply feared. I picked up my phone to call Sarah, then set it down again. What would I say? Honey, your husband just tried to blackmail me for $4 million that I never told you I had. She was on her honeymoon, probably having the time of her life, completely unaware that her mother and her husband were engaged in this nightmare. That night I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios, trying to find a way out of this trap Marcus had set. I could go to the police, but he was right. What he was doing might not technically be illegal. Immoral, certainly. Despicable, absolutely. But proving extortion when he'd carefully couched everything as business proposals and family discussions would be difficult. I could tell Sarah everything, but that would mean admitting years of deception and potentially destroying her marriage 3 days after the wedding. Even if she believed me about Marcus, which wasn't guaranteed, I would still have to live with the knowledge that I'd caused her that pain. I could refuse Marcus's demands and deal with the consequences, but the thought of Sarah learning about the money through his cruel revelations made me sick. He would spin it to make me look as bad as possible, and she would hear about it while she was supposed to be enjoying her honeymoon. By morning I felt like I'd aged 10 years. I made coffee with shaking hands and sat at my kitchen table, staring at Marcus's papers spread out before me. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 o'clock. "Good morning, Margaret," Marcus said when I opened the door. He looked refreshed and cheerful, as if he'd slept wonderfully. "I hope you had time to consider our discussion." "This is wrong," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "What you're doing is wrong. What I'm doing is taking care of my family. Sarah deserves security, and I deserve compensation for the risks I'm taking by keeping your secret." He settled back into Robert's chair as if it belonged to him. "Have you made your decision?" I looked at this man who had married my daughter, who she trusted and loved, who had somehow transformed from a seemingly normal person into a predator in the span of a few days. "If I sign these papers, how do I know you won't come back for more?" "Because $4 million will solve my immediate problems, and the revised will ensures my long-term security. I'm not greedy, Margaret, just practical. And if I refuse?" Marcus pulled out his phone. "Then I make some calls. First to Sarah, then to the senior center, then maybe to a few local reporters who might be interested in a story about a secret millionaire who's been taking charity from seniors while her daughter struggled to pay rent." The casual cruelty in his voice made me realize that this wasn't an impulsive decision on his part. This was calculated, planned, probably something he'd been working on since the moment he learned about the inheritance. Maybe even before he proposed to Sarah. "You never loved her," I said quietly. "I love the life she can give me. With your help, of course." Marcus leaned forward. "Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be, Margaret. $4 million is a small price to pay for your daughter's happiness and your own peace of mind." My hands trembled as I picked up a pen. "I want a guarantee that you'll never tell Sarah about the money. Ever. As long as you honor our agreement, your secret is safe. And you'll be good to her. You'll make her happy. I'll be the husband she thinks she married." The words felt like acid in my mouth, but I signed both documents. Marcus watched with satisfaction, then had me initial every page, explaining various clauses and conditions. By the time we finished, I felt completely drained. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, pulling out a third document I hadn't seen before. "I'll need access to the funds immediately. This is a power of attorney giving me authority to handle certain financial transactions on your behalf." "Absolutely not. Margaret, I need $4 million, not IOUs. My creditors aren't known for their patience, and delays could be problematic for everyone involved." I said no. "I'll transfer the money myself, but I'm not signing over any financial authority to you." Marcus's expression hardened, but after a moment, he nodded. "Fine. You have 48 hours to make the transfer. I'll provide you with account information." He pulled out a business card with nothing but a series of numbers on it. "Wire the funds to this account. And Margaret, don't even think about trying to trace it or report it as suspicious. That would violate our agreement." After he left, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not just for the money, though $4 million was devastating, but for the loss of innocence, for the death of the joy I'd felt watching Sarah dance at her wedding, for the knowledge that my daughter had married a monster and didn't know it. I thought about calling the FBI, the police, anyone who might be able to help. But Marcus had been careful. Everything he'd said could be interpreted as family negotiation rather than extortion. And more importantly, any investigation would inevitably expose the secret I was trying to protect. The next 2 days passed in a blur. I went through the motions of normal life, worked at the bookstore, made dinner, watched television, but inside I felt hollow. The money transfer took place on Tuesday afternoon. $4 million gone with the click of a mouse. Almost half of Robert's life's work, handed over to a criminal who had married my daughter for access to what he thought was family wealth. That evening my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. How could I pretend everything was normal? "Mom!" Sarah's voice was bright and happy, full of the joy of newlyweds on vacation. "How are you? I've been meaning to call, but we've been so busy with activities and—" "I'm fine, sweetheart. How's the honeymoon?" "Oh, Mom, it's incredible. The resort is like paradise, and Marcus has been so wonderful. He surprised me with a couple's massage yesterday, and tonight we're having dinner on the beach. I feel so lucky." The words were like knives. "I'm glad you're happy. Is everything okay? You sound tired." "Just missing you, that's all." Sarah laughed. "I miss you too. But guess what? Marcus said he wants to start having family dinners every Sunday when we get back. He's really excited about becoming part of our little family. Isn't that sweet?" I closed my eyes, imagining Marcus sitting across from us at my dining room table, smiling that perfect smile while knowing exactly what he'd done. "That sounds lovely. He's been so thoughtful about everything. This morning he said he wants to make sure you're taken care of as you get older, maybe help with bills or home maintenance. He's really worried about you living alone." The irony was suffocating. Marcus positioning himself as the caring son-in-law while he was systematically stealing from me. "That's very considerate of him. I know you were worried about us getting married so quickly, but Mom, I really think I found someone special. Someone who cares about family the way I do." After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to figure out how to live with what had happened. The money was gone, I had to accept that. But the knowledge that my daughter was married to someone capable of such calculated cruelty would eat at me forever. Over the following weeks, as Sarah and Marcus settled into married life, I watched my son-in-law carefully. In public with Sarah, he was exactly what she thought he'd married. Attentive, caring, ambitious in a wholesome way. But I caught glimpses of the real Marcus in unguarded moments. The way he appraised expensive items when we went shopping. The calculating look in his eyes when Sarah mentioned her co-workers' salaries. The subtle condescension in his voice when he spoke to service workers. He never mentioned our arrangement directly, but he made sure I remembered it. Small comments about how important family loyalty was. Casual mentions of how devastating it would be if Sarah ever felt betrayed by someone she trusted. Reminders that he was watching me, evaluating whether I was holding up my end of our bargain. The hardest part was the guilt. Sarah had always been independent, proud, determined to make her own way in the world. But she'd also occasionally struggled, and there had been times when a few $1,000s could have made an enormous difference in her life. Times when she'd eaten pasta for weeks because it was cheap. Times when she'd walked everywhere because her car needed repairs she couldn't afford. Times when she'd turned down social invitations because she couldn't afford to participate. I could have helped her through all of that without revealing the full extent of the inheritance. I could have claimed a small inheritance from a distant relative, or a modest return on investments, or any number of believable stories that would have allowed me to ease her struggles without raising suspicions. Instead, I'd let my fear of Robert's warnings about money changing people override my maternal instincts. I'd watched my daughter struggle while sitting on millions of dollars, and now Marcus was using that knowledge to torture me. 3 months after the wedding, Sarah called me with exciting news. "Mom, guess what? Marcus got promoted." Well, sort of. He's starting his own consulting firm, specializing in import-export logistics. Isn't that wonderful? My blood ran cold. "That's great, honey. What kind of consulting?" "I don't really understand all the details, but he says there's huge potential for growth. He's already got some big international clients lined up. We might even be able to buy a house soon." House. Purchased with my money, my husband's life work. Stolen through blackmail and extortion. That's exciting. The best part is, he says once the business is established, I might be able to cut back on work, maybe even start thinking about having kids. Can you believe it? 6 months ago I was sharing an apartment with 3 roommates. And now I'm married to someone who can actually provide security for our future. The word provide made me think of David, Marcus's best man, and his comment at the wedding about Marcus being able to provide for Sarah. Had they planned this from the beginning? Had multiple people been involved in researching my background, setting up the perfect trap? Mom. Are you there? Sorry, sweetheart. I'm just so happy for you. But I wasn't happy. I was terrified. If Marcus was using my money to start a business, what happened when that business inevitably failed or when he needed more capital? Would he come back to me for additional investments? And what kind of business was he really starting with money obtained through extortion? That night, I did something I probably should have done months earlier. I hired a private investigator. Detective Ray Morrison was a former police officer who specialized in background checks and corporate investigation. I told him I was concerned about my daughter's new husband, that something felt off, and I wanted to make sure she was safe. What specific concerns do you have, Mrs. Chen? He claims to work in import-export, but he's always been vague about details. He seems to have money from unknown sources. And he got married very quickly after meeting my daughter. Morrison nodded. How much detail do you want? Basic background check, financial investigation, or full deep dive? Everything. I want to know who I'm dealing with. 2 weeks later, Morrison called me with his findings. Mrs. Chen, you need to know that your son-in-law is not who he claims to be. His real name is Michael Torres, and he has extensive criminal history spanning several states. My legs gave out, and I sank into the nearest chair. Criminal history. Identity fraud, embezzlement, confidence schemes targeting wealthy widows. He's been arrested 6 times but only convicted twice, served minimal jail time due to plea bargains and good behavior. He's extremely good at what he does. Professional-level social manipulation. Oh God, Sarah. There's more. The import-export business appears to be completely fictional. I can find no business licenses, no commercial relationships, no legitimate business operations of any kind. His current address, the apartment he shares with your daughter, is rented under a false identity. What about debts? He mentioned owing money to dangerous people. Morrison was quiet for a moment. That part might be true. I found evidence of gambling debts, some associations with known loan sharks. It's possible he owes significant money to people who would be willing to hurt him if he doesn't pay. So Sarah is in danger. Potentially, yes. If Torres used your money to pay off his debts, she might be safe for now. But people like this don't stop, Mrs. Chen. They escalate. Whatever he took from you was probably just the beginning. That evening, I sat in my living room staring at Morrison's report, trying to figure out what to do with this information. My daughter had married a career criminal who had targeted our family specifically for financial gain. He had stolen $4 million from me and was using it to build a fake business that would probably collapse within months, leaving Sarah devastated and potentially in physical danger from his creditors. I had to tell her. There was no other choice. I called Sarah and asked her to come over for dinner the next evening alone. Is everything okay, Mom? You sound upset. We need to talk, sweetheart. It's important. Can Marcus come too? He loves your cooking and... No, just you. Please. Sarah arrived the next evening looking concerned but beautiful, glowing with the happiness of a new bride who believed she'd found her perfect partner. Looking at her, knowing what I had to tell her, nearly broke my heart. Mom, what's going on? You've been acting strange for weeks. I handed her Morrison's report. I need you to read this. All of it. And then I need to tell you some things I should have told you years ago. Sarah's expression changed as she read. Confusion became shock, shock became horror, and finally horror became a kind of devastated numbness. This can't be right, she whispered. Marcus isn't. He's not Michael Torres. His name is Marcus Williams. I've seen his driver's license, his passport. Fake identities, sweetheart. Everything about him is fake. But we're married. We have a marriage license, The marriage is probably legal, but it's based entirely on lies. Sarah's hands shook as she continued reading. Embezzlement. Confidence schemes. Mom, this says he targets wealthy widows. But we're not wealthy. You work part-time at a bookstore, you live on Social Security. This was the moment I'd been dreading for years. Sarah, I need to tell you about your stepfather's estate. Took 2 hours to explain everything. The inheritance, the secrecy, my reasons for hiding it, Marcus's blackmail, the $4 million I'd transferred to his account. Sarah listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking questions but mostly just processing the magnitude of what I was telling her. $10 million, she finally said. You've had $10 million for 3 years. I was trying to protect it. Robert was so worried about people taking advantage. I ate ramen noodles for dinner 6 nights a week last year because I couldn't afford groceries. I walked 4 miles to work every day because my car broke down and I couldn't afford to fix it. I turned down the job in Seattle because I thought you needed me here. Thought you were barely getting by. Sarah, I offered to help you so many times. You offered to help me by taking on extra shifts at the bookstore. You made me feel guilty for even accepting $20 for gas money. Sarah stood up, pacing around my living room. Do you have any idea how hard I tried to take care of you? How many times I went without things because I thought you needed the money more than I did? I was scared. Robert warned me about how money changes people, how it makes you a target. So instead of trusting your own daughter, you let a criminal steal $4 million. I didn't know he was a criminal then. You didn't trust me enough to find out. Sarah was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. 3 years, Mom. 3 years of struggling, of worrying about you, of making sacrifices because I thought we were barely getting by. And the whole time you were sitting on more money than I'll make in my entire lifetime. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you? Because it sounds like you're only telling me now because Marcus found out and forced your hand. If he hadn't blackmailed you, would you ever have told me? The question hit like a physical blow because I honestly didn't know the answer. I don't know. Jesus, Mom. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Disappointment mixed with something that might have been pity. What do we do now? She asked quietly. We go to the police. We show them Morrison's report. We explain about the blackmail. With what proof? You willingly transferred money to him. You signed legal documents. Morrison's report shows that Marcus has been arrested multiple times, but he's never been convicted of anything serious. What crime can we actually prove he committed? She was right and we both knew it. Marcus had been careful to stay within legal boundaries, even as he manipulated and threatened. The marriage was legitimate, the documents I'd signed were legally binding, and the money transfer could be characterized as a family gift. What about the false identity? He married you under a fake name. The name on our marriage license matches his current ID. If those documents are fake, that's identity fraud. But proving it would require an investigation that could take months. Sarah stood up, gathering her purse. I need to think about this. I need to figure out what I'm going to do. Where are you going? Home. To my husband, who, according to this report, has made a career out of manipulating and robbing people like us. Sarah, you can't. I can't what? Confront him. Demand answers. Leave him. She laughed bitterly. I've been married for 3 months, Mom. 3 months to someone who apparently researched our family, targeted me specifically, and married me to get access to money he thought we had. And my own mother knew I was in danger and didn't warn me because she was more worried about protecting her secret fortune. That's not fair. Isn't it? Sarah stopped at the door, turning back to look at me. You chose to protect Robert's money over protecting me. You chose to keep your secret over preventing me from marrying a criminal. Even when you knew something was wrong with Marcus, when your instincts were screaming warnings, you stayed quiet because you were afraid I'd find out about the inheritance. I was trying to do what was right. For who? For Robert. He's been dead for 3 years, Mom. I'm your daughter and I was alive, and I needed you to trust me. I needed you to warn me. I needed you to put my safety ahead of your fear. After Sarah left, I called Morrison and asked him to expand his investigation. If Marcus had criminal associates, if he owed money to dangerous people, If Sarah was in any kind of immediate physical danger, I needed to know. Mrs. Chen, I have to ask. Does your daughter believe you? Is she taking this seriously? She's angry. Marcus, but also at me. I think she's going home to confront him. That's not safe. If Torres feels cornered, if he thinks his con is falling apart, he might become desperate. Desperate people do unpredictable things. What should I do? Honestly, you should probably call the police anyway, even without perfect evidence. At minimum, they need to know there's a potentially dangerous individual with a criminal history living in their jurisdiction. That night I barely slept. I kept imagining scenarios. Marcus becoming violent when confronted, Sarah getting hurt, police investigations that exposed every detail of our family's business to public scrutiny. By morning, I decided to call Detective Morrison and ask him to contact the police on my behalf, presenting the information professionally and recommending an investigation. But before I could make that call, Sarah appeared at my door. She looked terrible, pale, exhausted, like she hadn't slept at all. "We need to go to the police station," she said without preamble. "What happened?" "I confronted Marcus last night. Showed him the investigator's report. Demanded explanations." Sarah's voice was flat, emotionless. "He didn't deny it. He admitted everything. He laughed, Mom. He actually laughed and said he was impressed that you'd figured it out. Then he told me exactly how he'd planned the whole thing, how he'd researched our family, how he'd positioned himself to meet me, how he'd played the perfect boyfriend to get me to fall in love with him." I reached for her, but Sarah stepped back. "He said the only mistake he'd made was underestimating how paranoid you were about money. He'd expected you to be more generous with family, more open about finances. When you kept playing poor, he had to change tactics and blackmail you directly." "Sarah, I'm so sorry." "He also said 4 million was just the beginning. That now that he knew exactly how much money you had, and now that he was legally family, he had years to work on getting the rest of it." Sarah's voice cracked. "He talked about me like I was a business asset. A way to access capital and maintain his cover. Where is he now?" "Gone. He packed a bag and left around midnight."